Okay, so now we're recording, and everyone is okay with it. And this is April 14, and this is the second session of our Empathy Circle facilitation training. And during the first meeting of our session, we were just learning the method, and we will be still learning this method, but this time we will focus on facilitation. And we are going again for 2 hours. We will start with short introductions, check-ins. Then we introduce you to the facilitation. And then we will practice empathy circle. And last maybe 15 minutes, we would like to spend again on feedback and some comments, final comments and propositions for you. So maybe let's start with check-ins. I will start with myself. My name is Karolina. I'm calling from Poland. I am a member of Global Support Regenerative Cultures Working Group and also Empathy Circle team. And I pass to you, Marta, as a second facilitator.
So I'm Marta. I'm from Portugal, but I'm based in Cork in Ireland. And I suppose I do various things with XR, but more recently I've been very focused on these empathy circles and trying to spread it out. So really happy to, and knowing also that there's people doing it a bit all over the place. So I'm very excited to be here with you today.
Martin, would you introduce
Sure.
yourself?
Yes, you can hear me?
Yes.
Good. So I'm Martin from Norway. Right now I'm in exile in Denmark, but it's kind of the same. I've been doing some work with empathy circles in Norway online since I started with Edwin in February, I think, and then been having about 12 online cafes with different groups in XR in Norway during March and April.
Okay. Jackie?
Thanks. Yep. Jackie, I'm from the Sydney Regenerative Culture Working Group, and we are exploring and rolling out lots of different online types of support. So a whole bunch of us, or a few of us anyway, have done this training so that we can better support our Extinction Rebellion groups over the next little while, virtually and once we don't have to be at home.
Okay, thank you. And now we will start with introduction. Marta, over to you.
Yeah. So what do I have here? Suppose we've put together some considerations on, what is the essential thing to know about when you start thinking about facilitating empathy circles. And so one, first thing is like, what is this empathy cafe and empathy circle thing? And so an empathy cafe is nothing but a whole bunch of empathy circles running alongside each other. So you've got a host that hosts the cafe, and they explain the method, and there's a round of introductions with everyone in the same room. And then whether virtually or in person, people split into smaller rooms or breakout groups, each with their own facilitator. And so they spend the bulk of the empathy cafe really sharing empathy circle style in those breakout rooms in groups of 3, 5, something like that. And then everyone comes back together into the main room or into the main circle to share what their experiences were like. When thinking about, arranging, booking an empathy cafe, a really important thing we found is to decide to have a topic or not to have a topic. So, and even, so if you don't have a topic, it's very open. It means people can share about, the invitation is directly to share about what's going on with you at the moment. Whereas when you have a topic, depending on how you frame it, you're you know, and the way you advertise it, you're sort of selecting a bit who comes. And so it's thinking about who is your audience and how do you want to frame it. I find myself, it's very useful to frame it as a question, because people sort of engage with a question a bit more than a statement. But really, it's just this thinking about what, you know, what am I inviting in, and is the language and the vocabulary I'm using as well, like, you know, is it does it have any political connotations, or is it sort of inviting enough? And then the other thing as well is to record or not record is a big question. I mean, very often I've started off thinking I would record a meeting, and then someone asked they wouldn't. And actually it was quite important for them that we didn't, because that just meant that they felt freer and there was a different depth of sharing. And sometimes if it's a strategic, you know, for visioning or for strategic thinking or brainstorming together, it can be quite useful to record, because then that recording you can then, you know, even privately, but you can put it onto YouTube and get a transcript, a written transcript out of it that you can use as notes. You know, so it's like you have minutes from your meeting without actually having had to put any extra effort into that. So that's useful. And then as well, thinking about and really be mindful of consent when recording. I'd say that's, you know, let people know in the advert beforehand that that's an intention or a request of yours. You know, might have to change it, but that's your request, and so that people come on and they know that that's going to be a request going to be made of them, and then really check for consent. You know, that people are agreeing, and that they're not just going along because they feel somehow coerced into it. And then usually we go for 5 minutes, you know, like in a group of 4 or 5 people, we do 5-minute shares. But there might be situations where for one reason or another you have larger groups and you might have to cut it down to 4 minutes or 3 minutes. You know, or if people, like at the moment we're doing it with this group and they only have 1 hour, and so we do it, you know, we might do shorter turns as well to accommodate the amount of time that they have. Yeah, that's me. Carol.
Okay. I would like to say a little bit about preparation to the facilitation. So there are 2 aspects of our preparation. There is we have to prepare the space. We do empathy circle, and also I would say state of mind. We have to prepare ourselves. So our experience is that it's very, very important to choose calm place and the background. My background is not that calm, a lot of books there, but it's still not moving. There is no any person behind me, which is very important. No other person behind us. Even if this person is sitting calmly, it's always distraction. There is somebody there, and it's always distraction for other people. And the same situation when we do empathy circle on in person. When we meet somewhere, we have to choose quiet, calm place with no distractions, so everyone can focus on each other without being distracted by the background, either images or either other people or especially noise, because it's very distractive. When we should take care and try to avoid background noise. It's very important. And we have this rule of muting ourselves when we are online, when we don't speak. And sometimes it might be difficult because we are joining the meeting from quite noisy place. We still care about it, and we try to minimize the impact of our background noise. This is very important for good mutual hearing, listening to each other. Another thing is preparing ourselves to the meeting, and everyone has to find his or her own way. I can share my experience. My experience is that I need to that for me it's good to sit down for a while. Sometimes when I'm very agitated, even do a little meditation or breathing exercise. So I settle down, and I have spent few minutes thinking why I am here, uh, what I'm doing here, what I will do for next 2 hours, what I want to achieve, what is my purpose, and what kind of person I want to be during this meeting. That kind of frames me and help me to facilitate the meeting. When I don't have enough time to do that, I always feel kind of distracted during the meeting, and I believe it impacts other participants. So I'm trying to frame myself to prepare myself to the meeting. And everybody has to find his or her own way to do that. But I believe it's very good to do that, to have such practice before the meeting. Next thing I would like to do is to show you a template of our empathy circle. We have template we use preparing to different meetings, and we use this template and we edit and we add to this template our own elements, everything we see useful. This is the pure template. I will share the screen now with you so you can see that this template, and we will send you this template in email so you have it and you can use it to create your own scripts for meeting. This is very important, and I think we think it's useful for you. I hope you see my screen. Do you see my screen? Okay. This is the template, a short outline, what is in it, and we start with pre-start preparation when we go online, because this is actually for online meeting, but it's quite similar to the situation when we do that in person. So people arrive and we have some points, some tasks to do before we start the the meeting. Then we have some explanation about recording. Then we start recording or not, depends on the meeting. And as you see in this template, we have written the whole text. We could say we never read this text, never ever, but we have it. So we feel more comfortable, more confident. Sometimes we can lose thread, and it's easier to find ourselves in a meeting. Okay, I'm in this point of the meeting. I'm in this step. Next step is I see immediately next step. So it's easier for me to find myself during the meeting. Uh, Next, we have short introduction, as we did in our meeting. Here you have explanation of empathy circle, the method, because we usually have newcomers in our meetings, so we have it in our script. And then we have the main part of the meeting, the topic, and obviously we have the information that everybody can share whatever is alive for them, and all the elements of the meeting are in the script. So it will be useful, and this is the basis for your own templates for your own meetings. You can use them to create your own script, to add whatever you feel is necessary in your script. Okay, so I will stop sharing now. Stop sharing. Okay. And back to you, Marta.
Yeah. Um, so I suppose one thing that, when I was thinking about what is the most important thing for me about empathy circles, and I suppose it depends a bit if you're a more experienced facilitator or but for me, um, it's really having a support group. Doing it as part of a team for me has been really important. And so I suppose the invitation that we try to is that it's really important when doing empathy circles to model the principles of the practice, this empathy and the mutuality and the sustainability of it, to model it in the facilitation as well. So I'd be so for me, how this came was I started going to Edwin circles, and then I started co-facilitating, and then I was part of the team. And anyone facilitating empathy circles anywhere is always welcome. So on Fridays, for example, we have, and Martin, you've been to it. Unfortunately, Jackie, it's at the time that is really early in the morning for you guys. Like Leona sometimes makes it, but it's very early. And so it's having an empathy circle facilitator support team that meets regularly and holds space for each other. And ideally we'd all find that in our national groups or our local groups as well, because it's having, there's various layers to it. One is having this group of people that you feel they know what you're doing, they understand what you're going through, and so it's like emotional support, it's practical support, it's an opportunity to, after you finish each empathy circle, to have a quick check-in. How was that for you? A debrief, a feedback opportunity as well. Like, oh, today it didn't really, and you have someone that you've built a relationship with over time, or a group of people. And that just means that if they give you criticism, constructive criticism, you'll be happy to have it. It's like, so it's really trying to model in the way we organize the practice as well. And so with this group that we have with Edwin and the others, it's also, we also have these meetings where, not as often as we probably should, but where we have this visioning of like, what are we each, because we all have our projects in the different countries we are, what are we trying to achieve as individuals, how does it fit in, and what is our vision of future with each other. So independently of the ongoing empathy circles, there's this sense of communal direction, and how do I fit into this. So yeah, so there's all those layers to having. So I really encourage, and I'm so happy that there's a whole bunch of you learning together in Australia as well, because I'll give you the opportunity to build those relationships. So yeah, and so Carolina also had mentioned that each facilitator has their own way of doing things, and that is very true, and you'll find your own, once, I'm sure as well, and it depends on what other experiences as facilitators you have, because that comes in with you, all the other bits. Anyway, so as well, it's because sometimes challenges will happen. Not every, you'll have days when you're facilitating and it's really difficult because there's someone, they're new, and you need to make them comfortable and insist with them and give them examples on how to, so they're struggling with reflection and you're giving them more support. So it's good to have someone that can tell you, oh, you could have done this, or next time, or even someone to co-facilitate if you're feeling a bit fragile on a day. And so there's many challenges, and we've put together a list that we'll send of all this different information. But rather than talking about it, what we thought was that we have an empathy circle, because from all our experiences, we could just talk about them and share that way. So the invitation for the empathy circle today is that we talk about our motivations about being a facilitator, and any apprehensions we might have, thinking about doing it forward, and any thoughts on what are like the main important things that you've learned in your experiences of doing it so far as well. Yeah, so that's the did I miss anything, Cara?
No, I think we can start our empathy circle. So we will be sharing some our experiences and ideas. If you have any experience, you can share also. It will be educational for all of us. And you can share your worries, your thoughts, how you feel, your motivations about facilitation. So let's start. And as usually, we will model Marta, okay? The process. I might be first speaker.
Okay,
Would you be my first listener?
go for it.
Okay, 5
Do you want me
minutes.
to time it?
Fi-
Or
I have
oh,
it.
you can. Good.
Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, so before I start, before I before I start talking about facilitation, I would like to mention uh, some aspects of empathy circle itself. And it is important to realize that we can speak to someone else when we share our thoughts and we discuss with another person. So we can discuss indirectly in empathy circle. I may, for example, I may disagree with Marta, but I will be speaking to Martin or to Jackie, explaining. I'm sorry, Marta, it's a lot of background noise from your side with your you
So
using.
that stopped. Did it stop?
Oh yeah, it stopped.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay. So I might discuss something with Marta or Martin, or let's say I'm talking to Marta, but I may discuss something with Martin or Jackie. So I will share my thoughts indirectly. That's very important thing. We don't have to speak to the person we discuss. We are disagree, for example, or agree. We can speak to somebody else and share our thoughts. This is very important. I stopped that because it's a lot.
Okay. So what you're sharing is that a thing that is interesting to you and you find different about empathy circles is this ability to speak to someone via someone else.
Yes.
So you're sharing something about a conversation that is going, between you and someone else. But when
Mhm.
you're sharing, and your listener is a third person, and that
Yeah.
can be even if there's a disagreement that is happening, you're still doing it via this third person, and that's different in an empathy circle from a normal situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is interesting because it slow down if there is any argument. It slow down the process and gives freedom every person participating in discussion to choose if they want to respond to something or not. If we speak directly, there is a question and a response. One person is saying and another responds to that. Here we have freedom to choose what we do with something somebody else said. We can we can respond or not. It's an element of mutual respect. I perceive it as an element of mutual respect and giving space to each other.
Mhm. So it's about, there's an element of mutual respect and giving space to each other, and there's also something you said about it's slowing things down.
Yeah.
That if there is a conflict or there's a tension, that it gives people the space for it
Mhm.
to settle and be more
Yeah.
paused.
Mhm.
So there's not that back and forth that you have in normal conversation. Instead, you have to wait for it to go around, and
Mhm.
each individual has the option of engaging with it or not as they feel.
Mhm. 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 Uh, Another interesting thing about empathy circle is that reflecting is not agreeing with someone. And it's worth to show it, to remind that to every participant, to show that that's how it works. We're reflecting somebody's thoughts. We are not agreeing with this person. When there will be our turn, we have space to say if we agree or not. But when we're reflecting, it is not agreeing with another person. This is very important, especially when we reflect back somebody's we disagree.
So it's important that people feel free to say whatever they want to say. And so when you're reflecting, that you reflect what they're saying, even if it's something you don't agree with, it doesn't really matter in the empathy circle. So it's okay to reflect back something that you disagree with fundamentally, because it's what the other person said. So you're just, repeating that for them, and it's not your own idea.
Yeah, thank you. I feel fully heard.
Martin, may I speak to you?
Yes.
So yeah, I've been very interested recently in this element of using it for conflict. I like to call it conflict accompaniment instead of resolution. It's but people that are in conflict, to do empathy circles with them, I find this is good, because the method really makes it easy for people to stay with the difficulty. When something is uncomfortable, we tend to run, but because of what Caro was saying, it's easier to stay in spite of being upset.
So what you've been trying to apply the empathy circle mostly to is this conflict accompaniment, more than conflict resolution, and it's more because of this functionality that people have the possibility to stay rather than go away from the conversation, but to stay with the feeling and stay with the intention, and resolve it through that.
Yeah. And I've not, I know that Edwin has used it for with political divides, left and right, and I've not done that really. I think maybe once. But I like this idea of having spaces of no political correctness, because it's something that we lack in society. In a way, is that we have not that I want, not that my nervous system does not necessarily want to be challenged, but I feel it's healthy to have spaces in society where we can listen to each other and actually listen to the people that we disagree with in a constructive way.
So your kind of idea came from, or the work that kind of came from, a little bit, you got inspired maybe even by this political divide work that Edwin is doing, but you don't really have that much experience with that directly. Maybe you've tried it once, but what you kind of like is this idea that there is a space where it's not necessarily, doesn't have to be this political correctness, just opening up the space to have people, what was the last thing again?
That you disagree with, to share space with people you disagree.
Yes, to share exactly, to share space with the people that you disagree with.
Yeah. And another thing that was on my, it's the different roles in an empathy. When you do an empathy cafe, if you're very fortunate and you're doing it as part of a team, you can have like the person who's doing the technology, if the Zoom rooms and all that kind of thing, and then you can have someone that does their introductions, and you can have co-facilitators, and I've had, I've done it in groups where I have that, and I've done it in groups where I don't have that, and it just feels much more relaxed when I have a team, I suppose.
So very nice for you if you have the possibility to have a team that you can rely on, that can take the different roles of being a producer, maybe doing the technological stuff, and at the same time also helping you through the process. It makes it a lot easier. You've had some chances to have an empathy cafe where you have a team with you. But then there's also those times when you're more on your own.
Yeah. Thank you, Martin. I feel very heard.
I can speak with Jackie if that's okay with you. So what for me has been kind of the background of applying this is kind of giving support to people isolated at home, and kind of letting stories emerge from different perspectives, not so much the conflict part, even though it's a very conflict-oriented way of doing empathy circles, but kind of having these stories that come up during this isolation period, and kind of letting them flow side by side, and seeing what people have that they can take out of it.
So your motivation for undertaking this training and doing this work is to find a space for people who are isolated at home to tell stories and to listen to other people's stories, and spend time together. It's not so much about conflict resilience or working through conflicts or different opinions so much as it is about storytelling.
And of course, making up new ideas together. We've always tried to have a theme that goes along with it, but very loosely have something that guides the conversation, and something that has to do with activism most of the time. What I've added into that is there is of course I feel there is a big need for lots of gratitude work at the moment. So that's been mostly the request I've gotten of later sessions, because I've kept it very simple, the cafes, and kept it as simple as possible and as accessible as possible.
Yeah. So you're using themes mostly to guide the conversations that you have, but you're trying to keep them simple and accessible. Quite often it's about activism in one way or another. And you also feel a need at the moment for gratitude work in the conversations that you're having.
So yes, a lot of resourcing through gratitude has been very important, I think, for people. Also for them to continue and open up to the space in a good way, and leaving the days blurry rest consistency out of the conversation, but keeping it open and opening up to other people. That has been kind of very much changing the conversation compared to what we did before, where we just kept a simple introduction and then information on how to do the empathy cafe, and then so on. So I would really also recommend that part, or thinking of ways how you can implement it and to get people into that right mindset to be gratitude is about something.
Yeah. So you're also talking about new ideas, as well as having themes about activism and gratitude, and your approach around gratitude and having people talk about something that they are feeling grateful for has changed the tone. I'm not sure that I've heard that right. Change the tone or the type of the conversations that you're having, rather than just talking about other things. So that's been a positive change, and you recommend it.
Yes, very well, very good. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Caro, I suppose I'll talk to you.
Okay, I will listen to you.
Yeah, so you asked about our motivation for doing this work, and I think there are a few things going on for our Sydney regenerative culture, as well as personally motivating to do this sort of empathy circle work. I think in our organization or movement, there is a lot of need for this type of work at the moment, because Sydney in Australia has just experienced a really significant collective trauma in the bushfires, and now we're experiencing something completely different but equally as unknown and frightening. So people are having a lot of feelings and possibly don't quite know where to put them or what to do with them at this time. So I suppose that's partly, we want to offer something that we feel like people need.
Okay. So you're talking about your motivation to do empathy circles. And it's both motivation connected to your work in regenerative cultures group in Sydney, but also your personal motivation. And you think that your society, Australian society, is in a very difficult situation after bushfires, and now again in different situations, very difficult for them, and the situation triggers a lot of feelings, emotions, difficult to express, and empathy circle might be a good place for revealing them and release.
Yes, yeah. And so that's sort of with the movement. And personally, I think that there are some experiences that I have as a person with a young family trying to adjust to this type of life that we're now adjusting to, that I think there is a lot of other people who are trying to have a similar, or who are having a similar experience, and would appreciate this type of forum to talk through the specifics of raising little people at a difficult point and a frankly rather scary point in history. So I think I have some training and a skill set that is relevant, and that I think can add something to what Regen in Sydney can offer.
So you also see the applications, the usefulness of empathy circle in your personal private life, in your family, among your friends, especially in a situation now we have, and we have to accommodate to the new situation, new circumstances. It's very difficult, and empathy circle might be helpful. And you have also your professional background, and you think that it's, if I understand, you can add those skills together with empathy circle to and make them useful for regenerative culture working group in Sydney. Is that what you meant?
Yeah. I also think there's something about empathy circles, or a similar type of model, where you're talking to people who aren't your family or close network of friends, who might be strangers or people that you're less familiar with. Sorry, you're not hearing me. Yeah, and I think makes it different than just talking to your friends or talking to people on the phone that you speak to all the time. I think empathy circles hold conversations differently and are not asking you to fix or offer advice or anything. So I think that's it's something different than seeking help from known network, seeking conversations with. Yeah, go on.
I hope I lost some part of what you were saying, but I hope I will be able to reflect that back. So, if I understand you correctly, you mean that you can use empathy circle in communication with somebody that is close to us, our family, our friends, but also to strangers, so to speak. You can use that on the streets. And what is important, empathy circle is a different way of communication, different structure, and it might be helpful right now, but I feel like I'm lost. I lost something from what you were saying.
Yeah, if I have technical problems, tell me, because it sometimes
Okay.
doesn't work so well.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you pretty much got it. Only that I'd add that there is something about having a sharing circle with people in this sort of format that we're doing now, whom you don't know and who aren't other parts of your life, that is useful, and I think adds a different element to supportive communication. Because it's one thing to talk to your friend that you talk to all the time, or your parent. It's something else to express yourself to somebody who has no other particular relationship with you or buy-in into your life. It's more objective in that way.
So you're talking about communication with somebody we don't know, and you noticing the difference between the situation when we speak with somebody we are familiar with, we know each other sometimes very well because it's somebody close to us, and when we talk with somebody we don't know, and empathy circle creates the space, the opportunity to communicate in a way that builds relations. That's what you meant?
Yeah, yes, thank you. I feel heard.
Okay, thank you. So I will choose now maybe Martin to change a
That's
little
fine.
bit our circle. I will start time. Okay, so I would like to emphasize the fact that every facilitator has his or her own style of facilitation. It depends on our personality, on our temperament, even on our view on empathy circle. We do that differently. Some of us are very strict and rigid in following the structure. Some of us are more flexible. So we do that different way, but there are certain elements we always care about. They are very important, and there are common values we all follow. So one of such elements and values is caring about equal opportunities to speak and being heard for every participant. I stop there.
Good. So you want to again emphasize the fact that there are very different styles of facilitating a work, an empathy circle or empathy cafe, depending on how the facilitator wants to work, and if he or she is very strict with rules, or how her day or his day is going, leading up to the empathy circle. So there's many very different ways that they can be held, but there are these simple things that should always be included and should always be a part of an empathy circle, with the first being this giving everyone the same possibility to speak, or the same amount of time and fairness throughout the process was that.
And we need to be careful. It's very difficult. Sometimes somebody has difficulty with ending their thoughts. We have to try to navigate between participants. We should care about the situation when somebody is for quite long not chosen as an active listener. There are such elements we have to be aware during the meeting and observe if everybody has equal chances to speak.
So it's very important to be watching and being careful about that everyone has this equal amount of time to speak, because conversations, they can go in different directions and in different styles as well. But it's very important that there's kind of this overview that kind of guides it smoothly back into its right form.
Another thing is to very important, I would say crucial to the empathy circle is not letting active listener to validate, judge, question, advise, etc. We can't let active listener during reflection to do that. That's very important to care about that.
So maybe the most important thing is that we have to be careful with the active listener, and that the active listener doesn't start to judge, advise, or talk back, but that it remains as a that the role remains as a reflector and staying in that role.
Even sympathizing, we have to ask for not doing that. There will be their turn to sympathize if they wish. Okay, so during the reflection, they should avoid that. This is very important, even sympathizing with the speaker.
Very important with the sympathizing as well, that should not be a part of it. There is time afterwards when they have their turn to talk, but empathizing with the person speaking, even that should be very very strict almost.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel heard. Thank you.
So then I'm going to talk to Marta. That's if we're going that way around. I very much agree with all the facts that Caro has been talking about, and trying to keep that as an introductory part during the start of the Empathy Cafe, with both a small introduction video by Edwin Rutsch, but also by modeling the conversation for the first time in the big group, and then letting the groups break out, but having it as short as possible and as on point as possible, so that people can spend the most time actively spending time with the method.
Yeah, so you agree with what Cara was saying, with the various things, and that it's really important to make those things very clear at the beginning, at the start of the empathy circle. You know, you can there's the video with the Edwin's instructions, but then it's also about modeling as a facilitator, to model it so that others can see you know, how to do it, and to be very clear, but at the same time, as soon as possible, to go into the breakout rooms so that people get the actual experience of doing it. Is, you know, it's as important. So it's being clear at the beginning while getting into the breakout rooms as soon as possible.
Yes. And in our case, it has been very keeping it as basic as possible, and then keeping the facilitation as a possibility to expand on, always keeping that mindset that this can be a very simple explanation example, for example, but then then you're encouraged to kind of take the conversation and be available to also develop your own skills of working in the small breakout rooms, so that there is this start point, but that very open ending that kind of leads to the more in-depth conversations.
So it's about keeping the structure very simple so that people can pick it up, and it's not it's not too complex. But then in the breakout rooms, there's this opportunity to expand and to grow within the practice, and to grow your own practice as a facilitator and the group, to see what kind of depths it will take you over time.
Yeah, keeping that very open in the description at the beginning is very important, to kind of give them that possibility to go out, that it's very clear that they can talk about everything, but they can also talk about the subject, and they can model it. Giving them a lot of responsibility in the room, I think, is very, very helpful. And if you have good facilitators that, again, have this skill where they don't interact in every occasion, but they really take their time to reflect and look through the process and then decide to act, then it really helps a lot to create this. Because there has been facilitators that have been very, very, very strict at one point, and really all the time. Then you have a facilitator that's kind of interrupting the process more than actually developing itself.
So it's about being open to possibilities, trusting the process and each facilitator as they develop. And so it's really important at the beginning to have it open-ended, so there's a topic, but to leave it spacious, so that people can take it and make it their own in the groups, and giving each facilitator, there's the instruction, but then to leave it so open that each of them can find their own way. And so they're not nitpicking on each little thing that happens, but they're trusting the process that it'll unfold, and each person will find their own way of doing it if they're given the opportunity in the space.
Thank you. I feel fully heard.
Thank you, Martin. Jackie, listen to me. Yeah, it is this thing of, if it's someone's first time, and they are doing a bit of the validation, this and the other, I'll give them, and if there's, I tend to give a bit of leeway to see, because it might be that after one round of seeing the process, they self-check, that it's not about valid. Like if it's a question, I'll go in and say, actually, you can ask that question in your time. But if it's just being a bit analyzing or a bit, then usually I let it go the first time around and see how it develops. Because really, as Martin was saying, I want to be spacious and not be, because it's a distraction. Ideally as a facilitator, you just, in an ideal scenario, no one would notice, right? You're just timekeeping, and you're almost not really facilitating. You're setting the tone by modeling it, but then you're fading into the background.
Yeah. So your approach as a facilitator is to give people a bit of leeway in the first instance, at least if they're new to the process. You notice over time that if some, validation or other type of response that is more than reflecting occurs, you notice over time that people see how other group participants are responding and self-check over time. You don't want to be the sort of facilitator who is hardline and nitpicky on things. Your preference is, in an ideal scenario, during a group to be simply a timekeeper, to start the process and then be able to kind of disappear into the background and allow the conversation to do what it needs to do.
Yeah, and it's been really great to see, have this bigger facilitator group, because everyone does it slightly different, and so I get to observe, and there's some of us, like Bill, that would have a really keen sense of humor, and so I can see sometimes how using sense of humor to sort of redirect people is a useful. I'm not as good as he is on doing that, but it's quite, there's people that just have that thing where they use the sense of humor to correct or redirect, and they do it in such a kind and caring way that it's nice to observe.
So you see in your facilitator groups that you do, that everybody has a slightly different approach, reflecting their personality, or in particular, you notice that sometimes humor is used as a way to redirect people, and that it can be done with kindness, and it can be gentle, and that some people you observe just sort of have this intrinsic skill to be able to do that type of work, and you feel perhaps you're not as good at it as some others.
Yeah, and another thing that I had on my mind was this, you know, for me it's very important that it's not therapy. It can be therapeutic and it can be healing, but it's not a therapeutic or a healing practice as a, you know, so for me that's really important to make that clear to people, because I love the depth of the sharing, but there's this thing of not taking responsibility for someone else's pain or even someone else's joy. You know, it's just like we're staying present with them in their experience, and for me it's a continuous struggle, but I'm, you know, I hope I'm learning over time is to not take responsibility for the experience of the other. In a way that's modeling, you know, it's this self-responsibility. And because we're not, I suppose what I'm thinking is there's this thing of wanting to call it a safe space, and for me it's like, and I've heard someone say it's a brave space. You know, we're walking towards each other and being together, but we can't guarantee it's a safe space, you know. It's a brave, yeah.
So for you, it's important to make the difference that differentiate it between being a therapeutic space and a space for sharing. You've heard somebody say that it is a brave space because people can walk alongside or towards each other and share, and in your experience share quite deeply, but it isn't necessarily a safe space, because that's speaking to a different purpose, a therapeutic purpose, which this is not. That is sometimes difficult for you. It's sometimes difficult for you not to take on responsibility for the experiences of the people that you listen to, and that sometimes is a battle for you. But it is an important element of empathy circle work that you're present for it, but you're not taking responsibility for it.
Thank you, Jackie. Feeling very heard.
Okay. That's what we were saying just then. I should speak to Martin. Sorry. What Marta was saying just now made me remember one of the hesitations. You asked us to think about what would be our hesitations in facilitating empathy circles, and it reminded me of one of the hesitations that I had thought of. I mean, there's a couple of challenges, I suppose, that everyone experiences, but one of those was being in the headspace to listen to other people's own challenges and stories, and that is not always the case that you're in a space to, we would say here, I'm not sure if it's the same for you, take on board, or you know, that sort of phrase, people's stuff, and how to make that, how to separate listening from absorbing.
So what you kind of were reflecting on was what Marta also was saying, and that was maybe one of the things that kind of was holding you back a little bit in the beginning, or one of the things that you had as something that would add to hesitation with this process. And this is this sorting of taking in information or reflecting it back, because it's not always that you're on the right place that you can actually take in all this information, and it becomes harder to work and stick to these to the outline of not taking it in and letting that become something that again you put onto the other person, but being there fully and having actually the capacity to be there fully.
Yeah. And I'd be interested in the advice of more experienced facilitators about how they work that out, or what has worked for them in keeping the separation between listening and taking on board or absorbing.
And you were looking kind of for some advice from the more experienced facilitators on how to stay in this listening and not so much absorbing situation, and how to work through it.
Yeah. And another one of the challenges or hesitations, I suppose, that most new facilitators, or anyone probably, would experience is just the challenge of staying present for an extended period of time. We all are so used to dividing our attention between many different things. I wonder, do people who are more experienced in facilitating, or who do it often, find that they get better at being present fully in one place for a couple of hours, or do they find it to be a challenge in an ongoing way?
So you're looking into this, the challenge that you kind of have also experienced other people have, is how to, and what you're looking to the more experienced facilitators is this, how to actually stay present in this given set amount of time with so many other things happening, and if that actually becomes an easier process during by doing this, or if it's a challenge that keeps on going throughout.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
I can, which have I not talked to yet? Are we? I can think we can go the circle on my screen and maybe go with you, Cairo. Is that okay? Again.
Okay.
One thought I had on, especially also how to facilitate. I don't know if it's very helpful, but there is what I've again been starting to think about lately is this. There's two things that I've used earlier in working with organizations. And the one thing that kind of struck me was that there is a very wide range of different personalities as well out there that have very different styles. And personalities can change from one personality to another over time. But I think it helps quite a lot to understand what kind of personality you are in the moment where you go into the facilitation process, and finding kind of some weight in it, because some people are, for example, more naturally able to distance from a process, and while other people are more likely also to take in distressful information and emotions on a different scale. So kind of figuring out where you stand has been I think quite good at having a good foundation to work out of.
So if I understand you well, you noticing that working with organization and doing empathy circles, you're noticing the variety of personalities that appear in a circle, in cafe. And it's changing not only between people, but also in time. So as I hear,
Your own personality will probably change as well.
Yeah, your own personality is different in different meetings, different circles. We change, And it is good to observe that, to notice that, and to kind of mm, be aware of this aspect of empathy circle, because some people are easier to 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 kind of execute to practice empathy circle, and they can, for example, keep more distance to what they're reflecting. And some people are not able to do that, and they experience some difficulty with staying in being empathic, but staying separate somehow. So it's very different. You observe different situation, and you also observe how it's changing in time.
So, and especially when it comes to yourself, I think it's very helpful to, there is some personality tests out there, and finding a good one that kind of reflects with you. Because, for example, the introvert extrovert aspect is good to be aware of sometimes. And it kind of, it gives you also this, because facilitation is for me very much about not putting on a show and being so close to myself as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And by kind of finding out and figuring out where I am also personality wise, feeling wise before the meeting, it gives me the chance to reflect and act out of that point of naturalness, instead of having to see what happens and how can we work with this, but really acting out of a natural grounded state, and a bit more security. I don't know if that makes sense.
So you are not sure if it makes sense, but for you is very important to allow yourself to be natural, be yourself in facilitation, to not show up, to not making a performance, but being very natural, being yourself, because you feel more grounded in your reactions, in the way you communicate. And it is important to recognize how we feel, who we are, if we extroverted or introverted. It's important to understand the dynamic of our personality, what we need. So that helps you to facilitate being natural, being yourself.
Good. Thank you. I feel fully heard.
Thank you. Marta, would you listen to me?
Listening.
Okay. I'm grateful Martin mentioned about that, because this is actually what I wanted to say, that I believe that it is important to care about feelings of all participants and being sensitive to what's happening to them during the meeting. But it is, in that sense, it includes being aware of my own state of mind and emotions during the meeting. I stopped that because it's complicated.
So you're grateful that Martin brought this up, and you feel the same, that it's about caring about everyone else's feelings in the circle, but as a facilitator to also be very aware and present with what you or yourself are feeling.
Yeah, because how we behave during empathy circles impact everyone. If we are focused or distracted, if we are stressed by some organizational technicalities or not, if we are fully focused on what's happening, no matter we are active listener or silent listener, our attitude somehow influence others. So it's very important to be aware what's happening in me, what state of emotions, feelings I am in.
So paying careful attention to what's going on inside is important as well, because whether you want to or not, it's going to affect the circle that you're facilitating. And so if you're distracted, if there's other technical things going on, if there's your own stress or your own, whatever you come with is going to influence the circle. And so it's important that you're aware of it and present with it.
And I discovered, and I learned from other more experienced facilitators, and I experienced the benefit of it, that it's good sometimes even share my state of mind. There is particular topic, but I'm telling other participants that I am stressed, I'm nervous, I'm distracted because there are some problems with Zoom or whatever is happening, and I'm stressed and I feel distracted, and I hope I will manage to focus. But right now I am in difficulty, I am in trouble. And that helps participants to understand why they might feel not comfortable, because I'm quite sure they experience my state of mind somehow. I noticed that it's very helpful to do that, to acknowledge the state of our mind and feelings.
So because you bring your energy to the circle, whatever is going on for you, you find it's really important to be transparent and to actually name, you know, if there is a difficulty, if there's something happening for you, to actually spell it out and name it out loud. And you find that it helps you, but it also helps everyone else in the circle relax, because it's not something that they're feeling but not understanding where it's coming from. They now understand why they're picking this up, because you explain it,
Yeah.
and they can relax.
Yeah. And it also shows my vulnerability. And I show it's possible to show my vulnerability and nothing but happening. That's good.
So you're modeling being vulnerable, and that it's okay. So it's you're giving them permission as well, in a way that they can show their vulnerability, and they'll be okay, they'll be safe, nothing bad is going to happen.
I think I would like to share one more thing. Or maybe I stop there and wait for the next round. I feel fully heard. Thank you, Marta, because my time is almost out.
So you wanted to share one more thing, and you decided to wait for next turn.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Jackie, will you listen to me, please? Yeah, it's really yeah, I've had that. I've had days where I had agreed to facilitate. I was there, and I just didn't. I remember one time I was in the garden. It was a lovely day. It's very rare to get good days of weather in Ireland, and I just didn't want to leave the garden to come and get in a room in front of a computer to facilitate. Like I wanted to, but part of my brain didn't, and so I was coming in with that inner conflict, and which meant I felt less generous than normal. And then there was this conflict not conflict, there was a tension in the group that had nothing to do with me. It was and and I was just feeling this inner, like, I don't know, something's going on. And so all of it was feeling quite artificial, or not, I just wasn't feeling at ease, and there was a lack of flow in me. And I just, I let a round go because I was trying to figure it out inside. And then I just decided I'll figure it out outside. I'll say it. And, and I'll say it without having figured out a story about it. It was by starting to say, like, there's this discomfort, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, just, and I think that just took the circle to a different depth, because I was modeling, that I'm just a broken human like everyone else, and a perfect human like everyone else. And that's what we're here to do, not to be perfect in any way.
So you tell a story about thinking about facilitating a session, and you were outside on a beautiful day, a rare beautiful day, and while part of you did, the other part of you didn't want to come inside to facilitate a empathy circle. So you arrived at the circle with that conflict inside you, and you noticed during the first round that there was tension that felt like it wasn't to do with your own inner conflict, but was in the group, and you felt ill at ease. You felt that there wasn't any flow in you, and there was something going on in the group. Your next step was to name that you could sense this was happening. As you couldn't work it out internally, you decided to speak about what was happening and what you were noticing. And the honesty of that changed the tone of the circle and took it to a deeper level. So naming what's happening rather than sitting with it silently allows for a different type of connection with people.
Yeah. It's this thing about co-responsibility. You know, I'm the facilitator, but everyone else is also responsible for holding me, and we're all holding each other. Yeah, that I feel for me that's part of it. I don't know if everyone sees it like that, but for me that's part of it.
Yeah. So before you said that it's about everyone being imperfect human, and that's part of what is this co-responsibility. You know, everybody is listening to each other and holding space for each other, and that's the responsibility of all participants in the group, not just a facilitator.
Yeah. And earlier you were asking about attention. Like my attention span and my ability to be present varies from day to day and moment to moment. And so what I've come to do a bit is when I'm struggling to be present, sometimes I might focus on the person's breathing, whoever I'm listening to, or the body language. I can get quite, you know, if I'm like there's these things I'll try and do, you know, and I've not thought about it much, so I'm not very articulate probably about it. But there's this trying to be present when it's not working at an intellectual level, like I'm just struggling to stay present. I might try and be very present in my body and in the body of the other person, or I might, thank you, Caroline. I might try, you know, and do that, or I might shake myself, but you know, like I'll try and do different things, or I might move a bit, or yeah, just to be present with them.
Yeah. So you're talking to the question that I had about staying present and having attention, and acknowledging that sometimes your attention span is longer than or easier to maintain than other times, and you have different strategies that you've kind of come across or you practice to try and help you stay present. And if you're not able to just stay present with your mind, you try and use your body and being attentive to the movements of the other person to help your mind stay focused.
Thank you very much, Jack.
Who am I up to speaking to? I'll speak to Martin again, I think.
It's fine.
I have nothing else on my mind to say. I hadn't thought of hadn't thought about speaking again. I will say though that it is good to hear for us and for me, and it will be for other people who end up looking at this, to know that things like staying present and having the attention and the energy and the headspace to do this work is something that everybody deals with.
So you were saying that it's kind of your turn again, surprisingly. You didn't actually think about so much to talk about, but it is good to kind of have this shared understanding and feeling that all of this with the headspace and how these difficulties that might arise kind of are the same for different people doing this.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that that's certainly one of the challenges that we will, I know in the Sydney Regen group and others will come up against, is having the mental, like the space to commit to this sort of work. I think it's been interesting to notice over the last few weeks how when our lives changed so suddenly, we kind of assumed that everybody would get used to it quickly and there would be an equilibrium and we could all sort of start living, you know, a new normal. And I think it's interesting to notice that that hasn't happened. There is no equilibrium or normal, and life isn't kind of settling like a lot of us expected it to. So I think it's an interesting time to be having conversations with people about how they're managing that. And I can see how equally valuable it is for the facilitator and all of the participants to hear each other talking through that. Sorry for rambling.
So I kind of understood that this is kind of, you're looking for it's what you're kind of also looking for is the people that will actually commit to this process. If I got that right. So that's kind of looking and learning step by step and seeing if there is going to be commitment to the process, especially in Sydney.
Also, sorry, I'll say it again in a way that
yes.
I think it's, you know, we're talking about our vulnerability or naming our vulnerability. I think it's noticing that it isn't an easy, that everybody has a different, is coming from a different place and a different level of availability. So it's not so much looking for people who are able to commit, but noticing that people are in different places in that they may want to, or I'm not being clear at all. But I think it's just all I'm trying to say is to note that we notice that it's an interesting time to sort of commit to this or to do this sort of work or to have these sorts of conversations.
So it's not so much just about like finding the right people that commit to it, but it's also kind of it's a weird situation because people are, like, when we go a little bit back to before, then it was this whole idea that maybe things were going to settle in during this crisis now, and it seems that things haven't really settled in yet. But there's this wide range of people that come from very different backgrounds that kind of need to kind of meet at a space together, but it's such a wide range of background and feelings and kind of creating something that really works good enough is what kind of is the challenge. Getting people to commit together.
That's right. Yes, thank you. I feel heard.
Let's see. Should we? I think I'm going to talk with Caro again because you also had that extra point afterwards, and I also have that extra point afterwards. If that's okay with you.
Okay. I'm listening.
So one more on this, and I think it might play a little bit into the differences that we are again coming from. And how our emotional status, I think it's again very important to be aware of where we are and go through that process in beforehand to be certain where we're from. I think you can take it from there.
So you talking about be awareness of different background we come from and being aware of differences and different situations we are in, different circumstances we are in, etc.
Yeah, so teaching people how to be aware of where they are right now is kind of a very important point. Um, there's like 2 exercises that I would recommend, especially for people who are doing this to begin with. The one is this it's called the Hono Ono Ono Popo. It's a Hawaiian, and it's a long word. I can link in it, and it's like a process where you kind of go through thanking for forgiveness, acceptance, and so on. I'm going to link to it afterwards, which is quite good to get you grounded before you're doing anything new. And the other one is this emotional
Let
freedom
me
check. Yeah,
reflect.
good,
Let me reflect.
good.
Okay. So you see not only the importance of being aware, but also to help and kind of teach people how to be aware of themselves, their state. And you want to share with us 2 good practices. One is from Hawaii, and I'm not able to pronounce that, but it helps people to ground themselves, to feel focused, to settle down, kind of, and find themselves in a situation.
That is correct. Yeah, that's a very long word, so I don't expect you to. I have difficulty remembering myself. And the other one is almost a classic. It's the emotional freedom technique, where you kind of realize what problems or what feelings do I have right now, or what might be holding me back from doing this process. And it goes through these meridian points where you kind of, it's called tapping as well. And you go through this, you repeat it for yourself, and you kind of accept yourself. And then, even though I have these feelings right now, I love and accept myself totally or fully. And kind of being aware of the things that might make you feel tense when you're facilitating as well. I used that back in the days when I was doing business as usual life, and we would have to fire people quite oftenly. I had a horrible job back then, but going into that situation, there's all these subconscious signals that our body all the time sends, and if we would be going into that meeting stressed, that would not be a very good meeting. That would be a closed off meeting from beginning. So being aware of the things that might be holding you back and working with them and accepting them as a part of you creates less this difficulty. Sorry, that was a lot.
I will try anyway. The second practice was, you call it emotional freedom, and it's includes some tapping the meridian, and acknowledging our state of our feelings and subconscious signals from our body, what's happening to us, and it helps to get grounded. And it is important because you recalling your experience from your work before, which was very difficult, stressful, nasty work, and you work a lot with people in the meetings, and you noticed that when you are not grounded, when you are not self-aware of all the subconscious symptoms you have, it affects you a lot, and this meeting doesn't go as you wish. So you're noticing an importance of being self-aware.
And yes, and being self-aware and keeping acceptance to how you're feeling, not changing how you're feeling, but keeping but knowing the acceptance of how you are and being all right with that. Very important.
Oh, so you adding to that it's very important to be not only self-aware, but also accept the state. not focusing on changing the state, but simply accepting the state of our mind and our feelings and everything we experience.
Yes, I feel fully heard.
Thank you. I will talk to you, Marta, again. Somehow we repeat.
Yeah, go for it.
So I was talking about the fact that, first of all, I'm happy that Martin is talking a lot about our self-awareness, because I truly believe it's important for facilitator to be aware, and the fact of acceptance of our state of mind and feelings, that it's important aspect I never highlighted, and now I learned something. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah, this is very important.
So you're grateful for Martin's sharing, and you and talking about the importance of self-acceptance, not just self-awareness, but also the acceptance, and it's really good for you because it's something that you think is important, but you hadn't thought of mentioning. So that he
Yeah.
got that is something you're grateful for.
Yeah. And I would like to come back to what I was saying about those important values that all facilitators follow, no matter in what style they facilitate. They might be different style of facilitation, but we all follow the rule of giving everyone equal opportunities to speak and being heard, and not letting active listener to talk back during the reflection. So those were first two I mentioned, and the third was being aware of our mind and our emotions. I stopped there.
Yeah, so you're going back to saying the things that are crucial to facilitation independently of the facilitator style. And so you're saying it's giving people having equal time, to not let the active listener fill the reflecting with their own ideas, and also being self-aware of where the facilitator is with their things.
And yeah, and one more thing, very important in empathy circle, is mutuality. So we let every participant, every speaker, to say whatever they want to say. It might be provocative, it might be even offensive. We let them do that as long as they are willing to be a good active listener. So they are ready to be reflective, good, to make a good reflection afterwards or beforehand.
So you want to add this principle of mutuality that is really central. And so to say that the speaker can speak about whatever they want, they don't need to stick to any political correctness. The only request of them, though, is that they need to be willing to be a good active listeners, that they need to be willing to reflect what others are saying.
Yeah. And empathy doesn't work when it is not mutual. This is very important. So any participants have to feel mutually heard and listened. This is very difficult element of empathy circle, but it's very important in every relations. When we are trying to be empathic to another person, this person has to be mutual to us. Otherwise we feel abandoned, kind of, in a process.
So it's really important and very central. And everything else hinges on it. So if you don't have that mutuality, it's not going to be equal, and some people are going to feel abandoned, or that it's not fair. So it's important, that element of fairness to it.
Thank you. I feel fully heard.
Do I speak to now? Martin, I suppose? Yeah, I'm also very happy with all these new things that, learning and sharing, and I'll definitely, because I've read something about the Honopopo before, but not, or whatever it's called, but not deeply, so I'll look at it again.
So you're really thankful about all these things that have come up during the sharing so far. It's been good to get that on the table. And you've heard about the Ono Po before, but it was a good reminder for you to look it up again.
Yeah. One thing I still have on my list is to avoid the temptation of multitasking. I'm guilty of it myself. Like, if at all possible, because it's hard to do. Sometimes I'm facilitating and I need to go and grab a glass of water, and I don't. But I know, yeah. Or I might be waiting on this important email, or or my partner might come in asking if I want dinner. It's like, okay, it's asking myself, can I suspend my life to be here for 2 hours? And I might not be able to do it all the time, but to keep the intention of that, that at least I might not be able to, but that is my intention if I'm the main facilitator.
So one thing that's really on top of your list is this whole thing about multitasking and being really in the moment and having the intention to be there fully. And that can be challenging for you as well, because you want to get a glass of water, or you want to take a break, or your partner comes in. So you really you want to really focus on this part and how to really just work with the intention and let it develop from there.
Yeah. And 2 other things that I've learned more recently. One is showing my timer. I show a card with the number, and that's not, just, this is an objective object and people like it better, but also to show it for longer than what is comfortable for me. I tend to show it and then see, did they see it, and then hide it away, because I feel very much like a teacher. But actually, I think it helps people more if if I'm very steady, if I just leave it there, and that's okay. It doesn't feel threatening. If I don't project things onto it, it's just an object, it's got a meaning, and I can just hold it and it's going to be okay. So that's, I'm still in the process of learning that. And the other thing is I tend to tell people to have pen and paper. And now I started telling the pen and paper is not for you to make notes of what the speaker is saying. You shouldn't have to do that. You can ask them to pause often. The pen and paper is just if you have an idea of your own that comes up when you're the listener, you can use the pen and paper to write it down, so you have it for later, for when you are the listener. So I used to just say have pen and paper, and so you can write things down. And now I've made that distinction to, if you can, use it only for your own ideas, and chunk the listening if you need to ask people to stop. So you don't use it for recording everything to reflect back, because I think then the quality of your reflecting is not as good.
So there was the thing with the time, and the thing you've noticed is that the paper with the 5 minutes on, that didn't work so good. So you're still working on what you figured out is more subjective and easier to use a clock watch or a stopwatch. And it's kind of the difficulty as a facilitator is always how long are you supposed to actually have that thing out without interrupting the conversation. But what you've learned is that just by holding the clock up and not putting any thoughts or emotions onto the clock, it makes it a lot easier, and you just leave it there for longer than you normally would be comfortable with. And then it's the it's the part
pen and
about
paper.
yes,
Yeah.
pen and paper. I was getting pen and paper is very, so you're also inviting people to bring pen and paper, but it's just to be sure about it. You always want to focus on that they're not using it to write down the part of the active listener, but bring pen and paper is what you invite people to do, and then with the extra thing that it should be their own thoughts that go onto the paper. If something that pops up in their own head, something they think of on their own, but it shouldn't be like a transcript or something that kind of helps the active listening process.
Thank you, Martin. Very hard.
And I think we have to end our practice and go to the last part of our meeting, which is sharing some feedbacks, our experience, whatever we feel we would like to share. And I propose a popcorn size, so whoever wants to share, please say things interesting about today Empathy Circle.
I can go. Or,
Okay.
oh, go for it.
Sorry, was that me? Yeah, sorry. How easy it is to get distracted. I saw the chat thing pop and I forgot what was happening. Yeah, it's good to learn something by doing it. It's probably the most productive way to, or efficient way to try and learn. So I think giving us the opportunity to ask questions and experience the answers at the same time is a good way to teach.
I can go. So, no, thank you for this very short invite. I was just enough time to take part today, so that was really nice. And there was some really good ideas that kind of came on the table, some good reflections, and it kind of just really helped to kind of get the energy for the next Empathy Cafe up again. Now I'm keeping a 2-week break now, just to let things settle a little bit over Easter, and then we're going to pick it up afterwards. So that was very helpful to get some more us moving into that direction.
Yeah, for me it was really useful because we did it with the other group the other week, and it's nice how so much different stuff comes up, and also hearing about your own experiences, how much we learn. Just thinking about if what you're saying, Jackie, about having this group for families with small kids. Like I know a group that is doing that in Portugal. And even with like parents that are stuck with adolescents at home, and it's just like it's nice thinking about all those different things, and I hope to learn. I want to sort of go after the things that you were talking about, Martin, and see, because I think gratitude practice, bringing that in is really important. I tend to do it just with introductions, having a question at the introduction, but maybe there's a bit more, at least with my local groups, that I could do to bring little, work that reconnects little bits in there somehow. Thank you. Thank you, Caro, as well, for doing this with me. It's always lovely.
Yeah, thank you as well. I think that was amazing to learn from you. That was great, because I was realizing some aspects of facilitation somehow I knew but didn't know, and now they are vivid and clear to me. So this is great. I love it. I think this is important to to highlight one more thing, that empathy circle might have different applications. We said a little bit, talking about topics, Marta was talking about different topics, but it is important to realize that we can use this process in different types of facilitation, in different types of empathy circle. It might be a more very emotional sharing, and it might be very cognitive, very intellectual sharing. So it might be different style. Marta was talking about brainstorming, recording brainstorming, and having then transcription in YouTube. We can use that for developing some ideas, or even developing our decision process when we don't have clarity what we want to do, and we have different argumentation, and we want to weigh what is important, what is sometimes even understand ourselves. Somebody's reflections help us to understand ourselves. That's very helpful. And conflict mediation, we were talking about that. The process looks a little bit differently. It's different level of complication. There are a few steps, but it also might be very difficult. And Marta, do you have anything to add? Because we will share with you materials we have. Would you like to add something?
I was thinking on the now I forgot it. I don't wait. Oh yes, so I was going to say as well, like, you know, because we're thinking about this as part of XR. At the moment on Saturdays, we're doing those empathy circles about the principles. You know, each Saturday we do it on a different principle. And it's actually been important to bring people that you know, historically within XR have been co-founders, or people that have been involved for long. And so on one hand, they've been more involved in coming up with these ideas or these principles or whatever it is. So on one hand, they have been more involved. On the other hand, they're perceived as having been more involved. So they're you know, there's some power structures happening there. So I think actually bringing those people into the empathy circle, where, you know, an empathy cafe, where they're just there with 20, 30 other people, it's quite, you know, an evening field. So I like the idea that it would be nice to encourage people in all the different countries that are in XR and that somehow have some structural power, and people that are shyer and, you know, maybe more introverted and not so much voice, that you can bring those in. And it's sort of, it's really XR trying to embody what they say they want to do and actually do it. And the other thing as well is that we've experienced in a couple of my circles recently, the situation might arise, and I've not spoken with Caroline about this, but the situation might arise where someone just wants to share space. They don't actually want to speak. You know, they've shared one idea, they still want their 5 minutes. But I've listened to people that aren't saying anything. You know, yeah. where we just hold the 5 minutes, and it's their time, and whoever's listening is with them and giving their attention. But there's, you know, speaking might be more than words. And I think for me, it's important that I'm open to that. And I don't know where that might take you. It might be that someone wants to sing a song in their 5 minutes. I don't know what the boundaries of that are. But listening might not be just with words, is something I wanted to add as well.
Yeah, I would add that I experienced empathy circles when my speaker, who's supposed to speak to me, was silent for 5 minutes. And he said maybe 2 words somewhere there. And that's it. And we were staying silent. So that's also happening. And actually, I didn't feel uncomfortable with that. It was okay. It was good. So it might happen. Um, First thing we will share with you in email. I understand that Marta has Martin email. Do you have Martin email? How you or would you share?
We've got, yeah, we'll find each other maybe if we write on.
Or if you share your email with us, we can send you some materials we already have. It will be useful. We have email or Jackie 20 by 11, something like that. Yeah, that's your email. So we will send some new materials. And another thing, we think it might be helpful. Maybe Martin feels more comfortable, but we decided that we want to give opportunity to all participants of our training to co-facilitate. If they don't have earlier experience of facilitating empathy circle, they can co-facilitate with us. So we have empathy circles on Thursday in open region call. And we also have empathy circles on Friday and Saturday, those mentioned by Marta. And I will share some links, so it will be easier for you to find those events. And I will send you some invitation to those events also, if you wish. I'm not sure if okay. So I send in a chat some links. Probably some of them you already know. And if you wish co-facilitate with us in a breakout rooms, that's first step. You can try to do that on Thursday. For you, Jackie, it will be evening. For us, it's morning in Europe. That's one option. And we propose to do after empathy circle short debriefing. So we initiate kind of work in support group, how we do that. So maybe after empathy circle, we would stay online for a few other minutes to share how it was, how it worked, how we feel about. We will share our experience, you will share your experience, and that's how we create slowly the support group. Anything you, Marta, would add?
I think Leona in the Australian group is creating from Monday the 20th.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because there's the Regen 101 modules that you're now, you know, doing in Australia, and I think Leona is going to be doing empathy cycles about those modules starting on the 20th, and so that's Monday. Yeah, I don't remember exact the time, but I'm sure she'll advertise it in time, and I can share it on the empathy circle working group thing once it's out. And so I suppose, yeah, I've not checked to see if we've got a reply back, but we might join that for our own, you know, to learn.
Yeah.
Me and Caro, well, and also to support. So there might be also the option of facilitating there, I suppose, or co-facilitating there, and get more experience. Now also, Martin, I'm aware that all these materials that we've come up with are in English, so I don't know, one, you don't need them anymore for yourself, and two, you know, I don't know how useful it will be for the other people that you're training, but the intention of this is that, you know, we're sort of trialing it now. Any feedback you have, what went, what could be better, or what, you know, is useful, and because I think the intention will be to then make this little package that we can give to the global support team so that they can then help train widely, so it doesn't just depend on these few people, so it can be, yeah, scaled up is the
If I understand that, oh sorry.
Mhm.
Um,
No, go on.
If I understand that correct, I can take a look at the material, and we'll probably also then use some of it to translate to Norwegian, or
Oh.
at least implement it as good as possible. And then I'll send some feedback back on how that has been working, starting next week, or starting after the 19th.
Cool.
Okay.
There's no hurry with this, right? It's like it's you know, we're doing this today, and then I think there's an Irish group, because I'm based in Ireland, that I'll do this with, you know, we'll do this with in coming weeks, and then it's just seeing whoever's got an interest and fitting them in.
I want to share one more link to our Regenerative Cultures channel on Mattermost. Probably you know that, but if not, this is the link I share in chat, so you can see any events of global support that are happening there. And also we advertise, so to speak, advertise our empathy circle there. So, but also other open region calls you can find there as well. So it's important to see that. Yeah. So I think that's it. We're done.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for today, and see you in any empathy circle, or if you wish to join our empathy circle on Thursday, just give let us know in email or on Mattermost.
I shall.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for today.
Have a good day.
You too.
Have a good day. Bye.